Welcome to Somali Nexus, the space where we celebrate stories that connect us across time, culture, and community. In today's episode, Somali Identity Explained, Language, Clans, and Culture. Across centuries, we dive into the rich journey of the Somali people, a story as vast and resilient as the Horn of Africa itself. For millennia, the Somali have thrived in one of the world's most historic crossroads, shaping an identity built on shared language, Cushitic heritage, and an enduring Islamic faith. Their story begins deep in antiquity, with ties to the fabled Land of Punt, once famed by the pharaohs for its treasures of incense, gold, and ivory. From there, Somali society evolved into a dynamic culture of pastoral nomads, fearless sailors, and brilliant poets. This episode explores how Somali identity has been shaped not only by ancient trade and Islam's early arrival, but also by the challenges of colonialism, state collapse, and migration. And yet, through every trial, one truth shines. Somaliness has always endured. It is carried in the strength of kinship ties, in the rhythms of oral poetry, in the flavors of our cuisine, and in the songs and dances that bind communities together. Today, the Somali nation lives not only in Mogadishu or Hargeisa, but also in Minneapolis, London, Toronto, and Dubai. The global diaspora has become both a lifeline for the homeland and a bridge between cultures, showing us how identity continues to evolve and inspire across continents. So stay with us as we uncover how the Somali people, through resilience and creativity, have kept their heritage alive, proving that a nation's spirit can survive even when its state falters. If you enjoy this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share with friends, and join the conversation online. Because Somali Nexus is all about weaving our voices into one story. Welcome to the Deep Dive. You know, today we're tackling something really fascinating, a real paradox, actually.
Yeah, it's the story of a nation, right? Incredible cultural, linguistic, religious unity.
Exactly. But without a functioning central state for, well, decades now. It's kind of amazing resilience.
It is. It's almost like a masterclass in decentralized cultural survival. We're not just looking at political maps here, we're trying to get at the sort of cultural deep state. What actually defines Somaliness? When the political structure, the actual state, falls apart.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We've got a serious stack of material. It covers, thousands of years. We're talking possible lengths to ancient Punt, medieval sultanates, the incredible power of their poetry, this complex clan system, and then the whole global diaspora reality today.
It's a lot. So maybe to frame it, we should start with the bedrock, the three big pillars holding it all together, yeah.
Good idea. What are they?
Well, first, this shared very old Cushitic ethnicity. Second, the Somali language, Af-Somali, which is pretty much universal, especially after standardization.
Okay.
And third, almost everyone adheres to Sunni Islam. Those three things, ethnicity, language, religion, they seem to transcend all the conflict in geography. They're the constant threads.
Okay. Origins? Now our sources really push back against those older ideas. You know, the ones from colonial times.
The idea they just showed up recently from Arabia or somewhere else?
Exactly. The consensus now, the modern scholarship, it points to a really deep indigenous history, right there in the northern Horn of Africa. They've been there for ages.
And that shift is critical. See, it roots them in that specific place in the Horn for millennia, rather than seeing them as like recent arrivals.
Which brings us to Punt, the Land of Punt. The connection keeps coming up.
It's huge for Somali identity, for that sense of deep history. The Egyptians called it Tanejeru, land of the god.
Land of the god. And it wasn't some faraway mythical place for them, was it? It was a major trading partner.
Absolutely vital. We're talking records going back to Pharaoh Sahore, 25th century BCE.
That's incredible. 4,500 years ago?
Yeah, this region was already plugged into the biggest economy of the time, and it wasn't just a one-off trade, it was consistent.
And the most famous evidence, the really vivid stuff, is Queen Hatshepsut's temple reliefs right around 1470 BCE.
Oh, they're stunning. Dear El Bari, you see the ships, trade, you even see what the Puntites look like, their houses on stilts. It makes it incredibly real. And the goods they traded tell you so much about the region's value.
What were the big ones?
Well, gold, ebony, ivory, animals. But the key things, the ones the horn is famous for, are the aromatic resins, myrrh and frankincense.
Ah, the Regio Aromatica.
Exactly. That's what the Greeks and Romans called the peninsula later. The sources are clear. This part of the world, modern Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, that area, that's the historic source for these resins.
So the geography fits, the goods fit. Does science back this up? Any, like DNA, evidence connecting Punt to this area?
There is actually really interesting study from 2020 on mummified baboons.
Baboons?
Yeah, baboons the Egyptians imported from Punt. They analyzed the mitochondrial DNA from these ancient mummies, okay? And they traced their origins squarely to the area of modern-day Eritrea and the Surround Horn region. So you've got this biological link reinforcing the historical text and the location.
That's pretty compelling. And it connects right up to today, doesn't it, with Puntland?
Directly. The autonomous state in the Northeast explicitly named itself Puntland to honor that ancient heritage. It's a conscious reclaiming of that deep history.
So these people, the indigenous Cushites, they were known through antiquity. First Punt, then Regio Aromatica.
And then later, medieval Arab geographers called the coast Bilad al-Barbar, the land of the Berbers, referring to these Cushitic speakers. So there's this thread, this continuous recognition of the people in this land for thousands of years, deep roots.
Okay, so if the old names locate the people, what about the name they used for themselves? Somali. Our sources suggest the debate about where that name comes from actually tells us a lot about their core values.
That's a great way to put it. It's like a mirror reflecting what's central kinship, livestock, wealth. These different origin stories aren't just, trivia. They're competing ideas about what it means to belong.
So what's the front-runner theory? The most accepted one?
The kinship origin. It traces the name to Somali.
Somali, the legendary ancestor figure?
Exactly. The supposed common ancestor of the big northern clan families, like the Deer and Hawaii especially. What this does is ground identity in Abtirsi,
That's the genealogy of the patrilineal descent, right?
counting back through the fathers. So being Somali in this view means sharing this ancient male lineage. It basically turns the nation into one massive, sprawling family, even if they fight sometimes.
Okay, that's the formal one, but the folk etymologies are maybe more, everyday, like the one about milking.
Ah, yes. Sumal, go and milk. This one speaks directly to how central pastoralism herding livestock is to the traditional way of life.
Go and milk.
Yeah? And what's really neat is how it adapts regionally.
How so?
Well, in the north, where camels are king, the ship of the desert. In that arid land, Sumal is understood as go milk the camels.
Makes sense.
But down south in the riverine areas, it's greener, more cattle there. They use a slightly different phrase, samal, for milking cows. So the same basic idea, go milk reflects the local reality. It's flexible.
That's clever. What about other ideas? Links to wealth or jobs?
There are those two. One connects it to Arabic zawamal, meaning wealthy, because livestock, especially camels, is wealth in that society. It's the measure of everything.
So Somali would mean the wealthy ones, basically.
Kind of, yeah. Or another idea is it comes from suf mal, meaning to herd livestock. So it started as maybe an occupational term for pastoralists that just broadened out to mean the whole group.
Interesting. So whatever the true origin, there's a strong feeling today about the word itself, isn't there? Using Somali versus Somalian.
Oh, absolutely. The sources emphasize this people strongly prefer the endonym Somali. Somalian feels like an outsider term, an exonym.
Why is that distinction so important culturally?
It's about prioritizing the people over the place or the state. They named the country Somalia, literally land of the Somalis. The people came first, the land is named after them. It asserts that the nation, the cultural identity, exists before and independent of any modern political borders or failed states. The nation is the people, not the lines on a map.
Okay, let's get into those structures that allow survival, and you can't talk about Somali society without diving deep into the clan system. The Abtirsi, our sources are unanimous on this. It's not some dusty old tradition. It's the main organizing principle. It's like Social Security, the justice system, security force, all rolled into one, especially when there's no state you can rely on.
It's a totally rational response, really, to living in a tough environment where resources are scarce and you need collective support. Kinship, defined by that Abtirsi counting fathers back, creates the framework for collective responsibility.
So, you've got the big five clan families, Darude, Dir, Hawiye, Isaac, and Rahanwain. But where does the real, day-to-day governance happen? What's the key unit?
That's the MOG, or Diaspora group. It's usually a smaller group, maybe a few hundred men, closely related through the male line, and they are bound together by hair.
Hair. That's the customary law, right? Not state law?
Exactly. And the core of Leaser for the Diaspora group is collective responsibility for blood wealth, the MOG.
Okay, break that down. How does it work as a justice system? Say someone in your group commits murder.
Then your entire group is financially on the hook. You collectively have to pay compensation, the MAG to the victim's Diaspora group, and the reverse is true. If someone from your group is killed, your whole group receives the payment.
So it spreads the cost and the benefit.
Precisely. It externalizes the consequences of violence. There's immense pressure within the group to control its members because everyone pays if one person steps out of line. And if you refuse to pay your share, or if you try to bypass hair and go to, say, a weak state court, you risk being completely ostracized. No support, no protection. It makes cooperation and controlling your kin the rational choice. Peace becomes economically sensitive.
That's a powerful mechanism. Now, there's also this big split, genealogically speaking, between Somali and Sab ancestors, which seems to map onto lifestyle differences.
Yeah, that's a fundamental division. The Somali clans, that's the Darude, Dir, Hawiye, Isaac, they are the majority, traditionally nomadic pastoralists moving across the drier areas.
Okay.
The Sab clans, mainly the Rahanwain, also known as Digil and Miraful, they're more associated with agropastoralism, farming, and herding in the fertile lands between the Juba and Shabelle rivers in the south. The split isn't just lineage, it reflects different economies, different political traditions, even different dialects. As we'll see, it fuels a lot of regional identity and friction.
And this system, Abtirsi, isn't just some background cultural thing. It's baked into modern politics with this 4.5 formula.
Yeah, the 4.5 formula? This is where kinship goes from being a survival tool to basically a political weapon, especially after the state collapsed in '91.
How does it work?
It's the power-sharing deal. Parliament seats, government jobs, ministries, they're allocated based on clan. The four major clan families, Darude, Dir, Hawiye, Ishaq, each get one full share of the positions.
And the 0.5?
The 0.5 is for all the other smaller minority clans. Lumped together, they collectively get half a share.
Wow. So what's the impact of writing clan quotas into the political system like that?
It basically guarantees that politics revolves around clan your access to resources, to power, to international aid that flows through the government. It all depends on your clan affiliation and this formula. So loyalty shifts from the nation-state ideal to your kin group because that's where the benefits are allocated. It makes national politics a constant zero-sum competition between these clan blocks. It's like institutionalized instability.
It actively works against building a non-clan-based system.
Pretty much, yeah. And before we leave clans, we have to mention the social stratification. Our sources are clear. There's a historically deep and sadly persistent hierarchy
between the main pastoralist clans and other groups.
Yes, the so-called noble clans versus low-ranking, sometimes called outcast artisanal groups. People like the Midgan or Gabuye, traditionally hunters, leather workers, the Tumal blacksmiths, the Yibir, who perform specific ritual functions. These groups faced and often still face significant discrimination.
Like what kind of discrimination?
Historically strict rules against intermarriage with the major clans, exclusion from resource sharing, social segregation. It's a caste-like system, really, and overcoming that prejudice is a massive challenge for building genuine national unity. It cuts across everything.
Okay, let's bring science into this conversation now because the genetics are fascinating and really reinforce this idea of deep, unique rates. Our sources say the findings basically blow up simple racial boxes. Somalis aren't just like a recent mix of black, African, and Arab.
Not at all. They form a distinct ancient genetic cluster indigenous to the Horn of Africa. That's the key takeaway.
So what does the genome actually show? I read about a dual ancestry.
That's right. If you break it down, it's roughly 60% indigenous East African ancestry and about 40% ancestry that tracks back to West Eurasia. But, and this is the crucial point, when did that West Eurasian component arrive?
Okay, when? Was it recent? Like with the spread of Islam?
Absolutely not. The genetic studies estimate the divergence, the split, happened at least 23,000 years ago.
23,000 years ago?
Yep. We're talking the Paleolithic era. This points to a very, very ancient migration, probably back to Africa across the Red Sea area, long before recorded history as we know it. So that West Eurasian part is effectively as indigenous to the Horn landscape as the African part it mixed with thousands and thousands of years ago. It fundamentally rewrites the narrative away from admixture.
Wow. Okay, and this shared deep history, does it show up specifically in like male lineages, connecting back to the Abtirsi idea?
It connects incredibly strongly. The homogeneity on the paternal side is just astounding.
How so?
We look at specific genetic markers passed down from father to son. The Y chromosome haplogroups. One marker in particular, E1B1B, also called EV32.
Okay,
Studies find that somewhere between 77 and 79%, almost 44 out of 50 Somali men carry this specific paternal marker. That's the highest frequency reported for this marker anywhere in the world.
79%. That's an incredibly strong signal of shared ancestry on the father's side.
It is. It's like a biological echo of the cultural emphasis on Abtirsi. You can almost imagine this cultural practice of tracing lineage through fathers over millennia, contributing to this massive concentration of a specific paternal line. A real feedback loop between culture and biology over vast timescales.
So, this unique genetic profile, does it have practical implications today, especially thinking about health, medicine? Why should you know our listeners care about this genetic distinctiveness?
It matters hugely, especially for diaspora Somalis interacting with healthcare systems worldwide. Precision medicine is key here. For instance, Somalis have a distinction: human leukocyte antigen HLA profile.
HLA. Those are immune system genes.
Exactly, and their specific HLA architecture. Certain combinations are linked to a significantly increased risk of developing type 1 diabetes.
Ah, okay. That might explain why you sometimes hear about higher rates in Somali kids in, say, the US or Scandinavia.
It's definitely a contributing factor that doctors need to be aware of for screening and early diagnosis.
And what about how they process medicines, pharmacogenetics?
That's probably even more critical day to day. Somalis have some of the world's highest frequencies of certain genetic variants that affect drug metabolism. Key genes like UGT1A4 and VKORC1.
And these genes control how quickly or slowly your body breaks down. Common medications.
Precisely. Take warfarin, for example. It's a very common blood thinner.
Right?
If you carry the specific VK or C1 variants that are super common in Somalis, the standard dose of warfarin might be way too high for you, leading to dangerous bleeding, or way too low, leaving you at risk of clots. Without knowing the patient's genetic profile, doctors are flying blind. So for safe and effective treatment, understanding this unique Somali genetic landscape isn't just interesting, it's essential.
Okay, moving from the deep biological past to something incredibly present and alive. The Somali language. Af-Somali. This seems like maybe the single most powerful unifying force cutting across those clan lines and colonial borders we talked about.
It really is. Linguistically, it sits in the East Cushitic branch of the big Afro-Asiatic family. It's closely related to languages like Afar and Saho languages spoken nearby.
So, one language, but is it completely uniform? Or are there differences, like dialects?
That's the nuance. It is considered one language, but there's a significant dialectal split, mainly reflecting that historical Somali-Sab divide. The nomad versus farmer split again.
Okay, what are the main dialects?
There are broadly three groups. The most widespread and the one that forms the basis for standard Somali is Northern and Central Somali, sometimes called Mahatiri. This is the dialect used in government, education, media, and crucially in classical poetry. It's the prestige dialect.
Got it. Northern and Central Somali, or Mahatiri, is standard. What else?
Then you have Mai. This is spoken mostly by the Rahanwain clans, the Sab, down in those fertile riverine areas in the south. And Mai is, well, it's substantially different.
How different? Like a strong regional accent, or more than that?
Much more. We're talking significant differences in pronunciation, grammar, even core vocabulary, to the point where Mahatiri speakers and Mai speakers often can't easily understand each other. Yeah, the difference is often compared to Spanish versus Portuguese. Related but not immediately mutually intelligible. Some linguists even argue Mai should be classified as a separate, though closely related Cushitic language. It really highlights those deep regional and historical divergences.
And for most of its history, Somali was purely an oral language. Right? No widely accepted script.
That's right. Relied entirely on memory and oral transmission. There were some unique indigenous scripts developed, like Osmania and Brahma, but none gained universal acceptance until the big change in 1972.
Under the Siad Barre regime. What happened?
It was a truly revolutionary moment. After decades of debate and deadlock, Barre's government made a decisive move. They officially adopted a standardized script for Somali, choosing a simple, practical, Latin-based alphabet.
Just adopting a script seems huge. But they did more than that, didn't they?
Oh yeah, it wasn't just a decree. It was immediately followed by an absolutely massive nationwide literacy campaign, Hantiwadag, the sharing of wealth, but in this case, knowledge.
How massive are we talking?
Unprecedented, really. They closed schools and government offices for about a year. Students, teachers, civil servants were mobilized, sent out across the entire country, into the nomadic interior, into the farming villages specifically, to teach everyone, adults and children, how to read and write their own language in this new script.
Wow. Was it successful?
Remarkably so. By all accounts, it dramatically increased literacy rates. And crucially, it created a single unified written standard for the language. For the first time in history, it was a powerful tool for national integration and, of course, for the state to disseminate its message. A real watershed moment.
And that unified language finds its highest expression in what Somalia is perhaps most famous for culturally, poetry. They're called the nation of poets. And our sources stress this isn't just, art for art's sake. It's deeply functional. It's like a system for politics, for law, for remembering history.
Absolutely. You can think of it as a core technology of social organization, especially vital in a society that was largely nomadic and non-literate for centuries. How do you govern, make contracts, record history, when people are constantly moving and you don't have written records? Poetry was a key part of the answer.
How does that work? You mentioned a protocol. What makes a poem reliable enough to function like a legal document or a political broadcast?
There are strict, universally understood rules that poets have to follow, especially in the classical genres. The two big ones are quantitative meter, meaning the rhythm is based on the length of vowels, long or short, and mandatory alliteration.
Alliteration, like sounds repeating?
Exactly. A specific consonant sound has to be repeated on key-stressed words within every single line of the poem. These rules aren't just for show, they make the poems incredibly memorable.
Like mnemonic devices.
Precisely. They make it much easier to memorize long, complex poems accurately. And crucially, they make it almost impossible for someone to change a word or a line later without it sounding obviously wrong, because it would break the meter or the alliteration. It ensures the integrity of the information being transmitted. It's like built-in error correction for the oral tradition.
Okay, so that's the technical side. How is it used in practice for politics or resolving conflicts?
Poets were central figures, not just entertainers, but historians, social critics, diplomats, propagandists. They used the most prestigious genre, the gabai, long, serious chanted poems to sway public opinion, to criticize leaders, to praise allies, to declare war or peace.
And people took this seriously. Like a poem could actually change things.
Oh, definitely. Think about the poetic chains, the silsilad.
What were those?
Imagine a major political dispute. A famous poet from one side would compose a powerful gabe, laying out their argument, maybe attacking the other side. It would spread like wildfire orally. Then a poet from the opposing side would be honor-bound to respond, often within days, with their own gabe. And here's the amazing. The response had to follow the exact same meter and critically continue the same alliterative consonant used in the first poem.
Wow, that takes incredible skill.
Immense skill. And the whole nation would be listening, judging the arguments, the skill, the wit. These poetic duels could go back and forth for months, shaping alliances, mobilizing clans, sometimes even forecasting major political shifts or conflicts. It was high stakes, public discourse, and curse.
It sounds like there must have been rules about who wrote what, too, like intellectual property.
There was absolutely a very strict, though unwritten copyright system. When someone recited a poem, a memorizer, Hafidayal, they were obligated by custom to state the original author's name first, and they had to recite it verbatim. Tampering with someone else's poem or claiming it as your own was a serious social offense. It shows how much value was placed on authorship and the integrity of the words.
Now, was this mostly a male domain, or did women have their own poetic traditions?
Women have always been central poets, though often using distinct genres, while men dominated the political gabai. Women's primary classical genre is the buranbur.
Buranbur. What's that used for?
It's used for everything: wedding songs, celebrations, lamentations. But women also use buranbur very powerfully to comment on social issues, to pass down wisdom, to subtly critique patriarchal norms, and even for political mobilization and resistance. It's often performed collectively with drumming and dance, making it a really potent community force.
And poetry adapted to mart times too, didn't it? With the high elo?
Yes. The hello emerged in the mid-20th century, especially in the cities. It's different. It's usually sung, often accompanied by instruments like the oud, kaban, and it very quickly became the main vehicle for popular music, and especially for nationalist sentiments during the anti-colonial struggle and the early independence years. Songs about unity, freedom, the greater Somalia dream. It shows how this core cultural form just adapts to new contexts and new media.
Okay, let's pivot to the sweep of history. After Islam arrived around the 7th century, those ancient coastal towns, Mogadishu, Zayla, Berbera, others, really blossomed, didn't they? They became major sultanates.
Absolutely. This was a kind of medieval golden age, especially for the coast. These cities were sophisticated centers of trade connecting Africa to the Middle East and Asia. They were cosmopolitan hubs of Islamic scholarship and commerce, part of the wider Indian Ocean world.
But inland things were different, more conflict.
Well, especially in the north, these powerful Muslim sultanates, particularly Ifat and later Adal, found themselves in direct, prolonged confrontation with the Christian highland kingdom of Ethiopia, the Solomonic Empire. This became a major fault line.
And that conflict really exploded in the 16th century with Imam Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi, right? Known as Ahmed Gurey, the left-handed.
He's a pivotal figure. He managed to unite various Somali clans and, crucially, obtain Ottoman support, including firearms. This gave him a military edge. His invasion of Ethiopia, starting around 1529, was devastating for the Christian kingdom.
He almost conquered them entirely.
Very nearly. He pushed deep into the highlands, burned monasteries, occupied huge territories. It looked like the end for the Solomonic dynasty. The whole geopolitical balance of the Horn was shifting.
But Ethiopia survived.
External intervention, Portugal. The Portuguese saw the rise of a powerful Ottoman-backed Muslim state in the Horn as a major threat to their own interests in the Indian Ocean. So they sent a small but crucial expeditionary force with musketeers. In 1542, they helped the Ethiopians turn the tide, and Ahmed Gurey was eventually killed in battle.
So, the legacy of that war.
Immense. It cemented that religious and political fault line between the largely Muslim lowlands and coast and the Christian highlands. It created centuries of mistrust and conflict, and for Somalis, the memory of Ahmed Gurey's near victory became this incredibly powerful historical touchstone, fueling ideas of lost greatness and becoming a key inspiration for 20th century nationalism and the dream of uniting all Somali territories.
While all that drama was unfolding up north, what was happening in the south? You mentioned the Ajuran Sultanate earlier.
Right down in the fertile river valleys, the Ajuran Sultanate emerged as a different kind of power from about the 13th to 17th century. They were more centralized, focused on controlling water resources through canals and wells, a hydraulic empire. They were known for efficient administration, taxation, resisting Portuguese attempts to control the coast, and also fighting off migrations from Oromo groups. They left behind impressive ruins, castles, fortifications, indicating a pretty sophisticated state structure well before Europeans showed up.
But eventually the Europeans did show up. Late 19th century, the scramble for Africa hits the Horn. Britain, Italy, France, they carve up the Somali lands.
Yeah. And the way they partitioned it had huge long-term consequences because the different colonial powers ruled very differently.
How so? Let's take the British and Italians.
Okay, British Somaliland in the northwest was mostly about strategic positioning. They needed the port of Berbera to supply their garrison across the water in Aden, guarding the route to the Suez Canal. So they mostly practiced indirect rule, didn't invest much, kind of neglected the place economically.
And the Italians further south and east.
Italian Somaliland saw a much more direct intervention, more investment in infrastructure, especially under Mussolini's fascist regime, but also more exploitation, plantations, forced labor, Italian settlement schemes, a much heavier colonial footprint.
So these different experiences under colonial rule, they didn't create clan divisions, but they sort of weaponized them.
That's a good way to put it. They definitely amplified existing differences. Colonial administrators often governed through clan structures, appointing chiefs, allocating scarce resources or jobs along clan lines. This turned clans into competing political constituencies, all vying for favor from the colonial master. It laid the groundwork for future conflict by tying political access directly to clan identity.
But the Somalis didn't just accept this. There was major resistance, wasn't there? The dervish movement.
Oh, absolutely. Led by Sayyid Muhammad Abdullah Hassan, whom the British dismissively called the Mad Mullah. This was a major 20-year anti-colonial war from about 1900 to 1920.
What was his goal?
To unite the Somali clans, drive out all the colonial powers, British, Italian, Ethiopian, and establish a unified independent Islamic Somali state. And his main tool for achieving this wasn't just guns.
It was poetry again.
It was absolutely central. The Sayyid was a master poet in the classical Gabai tradition. Our sources emphasize his genius in using poetry as propaganda, as mobilization, as diplomacy. He composed thousands of poems, rallying cries against the colonizers, fierce condemnations of clans who collaborated with them, praises for his warriors. These poems traveled faster than any colonial dispatch writer, spreading through the oral network, unifying people across clan lines under this religious and nationalist banner.
A decentralized communication network powered by verse.
Exactly. But after holding out for 2 decades, how was he finally defeated?
Technology. It wasn't ground troops that beat the dervishes in the end. It was the novelty of air power. In 1920, the British Royal Air Force used airplanes, just a few really, to bomb the dervish capital, Tala, and other strongholds. It scattered. His forces broke the movements back. A very early and brutal example of colonial air control. Okay, fast forward to past World War II. The colonial era ends, and in 1960, a part of that greater Somalia dream is realized. Right? The British and Italian parts unite?
Yes. The former British Somaliland Protectorate and the UN Trust Territory of Somalia, formerly Italian Somaliland, voluntarily joined together to form the independent Somali Republic. Huge moment of optimism, national pride.
And initially, it looked promising. It was seen as a democratic model for a while.
Yes. In the early 60s, it had a multi-party system, a relatively free press elections, even gave women the vote. Quite early, 1963, it looked like a success story.
But underneath, those tensions we talked about were still there. The colonial legacies definitely festering.
The biggest issue was the imbalance between the North ex-British and the South ex-Italian. The South was more developed, political dominant, got the capital city, Mogadishu. People in the North, Particularly the Isaac clan family, who were the majority there, felt marginalized, like they'd traded British rule for domination by southern clans in the unified state. That grievance never really went away.
And this instability eventually leads to the military coup in 1969.
Correct? Led by Major General Mohammed Siad Barre, he overthrew the civilian government, banned political parties, and established a military regime.
What was his ideology? He called it scientific socialism.
Yeah, it was this kind of unique blend, officially Marxist-Leninist. But Barre was careful to fuse it with appeals to Somali nationalism and also Islamic principles. He declared war on tribalism, as he called clanism. The famous slogan was "Tribalism divides, socialism unites."
And his big move towards unity was standardizing the language.
That was his most significant and arguably positive, lasting achievement, adopting the Latin script in 1972 and the mass literacy campaign. It was a genuine attempt to forge a common national identity that went beyond clan.
But the regime became increasingly authoritarian. And then came the big mistake, the Ogaden War in 1977 to 78.
The absolute turning point, Barre fueled by nationalist ambition and hoping to unite all Somalis under his rule, invaded the Ogaden region of Ethiopia, which is predominantly Somali inhabited.
And it went badly wrong.
Disastrously wrong. At first, the Somali army made huge gains, but then the geopolitical chessboard flipped. The Soviet Union, which had been backing Somalia, switched sides and threw its massive support behind the new Marxist regime in Ethiopia. With Soviet advisors, weaponry, and thousands of Cuban troops, the Ethiopians launched a counteroffensive that completely routed the Somali army.
What did that defeat do to Barre's regime and the country?
It shattered his prestige and the credibility of his scientific socialism. The economic cost was huge. Refugees poured in, and crucially, it blew the lid off the suppressed clan tensions. Barre, feeling his power slipping, increasingly abandoned even the pretense of anti-clanism. He started relying more and more heavily on his own Marehan clan and related clans for security and power, purging others. He responded to dissent, particularly from the Isaac in the north, who felt vindicated by the war's failure with brutal repression, state terror, and eventually horrific violence in the late 1980s that amounted to ethnic cleansing. This ignited a full-blown civil war.
So we step back. What's the core paradox here about the state itself leading to collapse?
The brutal paradox is this: creating a strong, centralized state which was supposed to overcome clan divisions actually ended up making them more dangerous. Because all the power and resources were concentrated in Mogadishu, controlling the state became the ultimate prize. So clan identity got completely politicized, weaponized in a desperate zero-sum fight for control of that central apparatus. The state didn't eliminate clan, it just raised the stakes. And when Barre's regime finally crumbled under the weight of its own brutality in the Civil War in 1991, the whole centralized state structure just imploded, leaving nothing but competing clan militias fighting over the ruins. The very thing designed to unite ultimately tore it apart.
Right. So 1991, Barre falls, the state collapses. And what follows is just chaos. Warlords, famine, the images the world saw.
Yeah, a truly Hobbesian nightmare. Complete disintegration, rival militias carving up Mogadishu in the south, catastrophic violence, mass displacement, and then the ill-fated UN and US intervention, Operation Restore Hope, which ended pretty badly.
But amidst that chaos, different regions started forging their own paths, didn't they? Like Somaliland in the northwest?
Exactly. The former British Somaliland, dominated by the Isaac clan, declared independence unilaterally in May 1991. They basically said, "We're out. We didn't sign up for this chaos."
And they managed to build stability how?
And this is the fascinating part, not through international aid or intervention. Primarily, they did it from the ground up through a series of lengthy traditional peace conferences led by clan elders. They used customary law, that hair negotiation, consensus building between clans to establish peace, disarm militias, and gradually build functioning institutions. Their own government, police force, currency, regular elections.
So they used the cultural deep state, the traditional structures, to build a modern de facto state.
That's exactly what they did. It's a remarkable story. Now they remain internationally unrecognized, which causes huge problems for them economically and politically. but they have achieved relative peace and democratic governance for 3 decades, which is a stark contrast to much of the South.
Okay, what about Puntland in the northeast?
Puntland took a different route. Established as an autonomous state in 1998 predominantly by the Mayurton subclan of the Druid, but they explicitly chose not to seek independence.
Why not?
Their position has always been that they want to be part of a future federal Somalia. They established their own administration for stability and governance in their region, but their ultimate goal is reunification within a federal structure. So we have these two very different visions for the future emerging from the collapse.
And the situation in the rest of Somalia, particularly the south and Mogadishu today. Still fragile.
Extremely fragile, unfortunately. There is a federal government internationally recognized based in Mogadishu, but its actual authority across the country is often very limited. It relies heavily on African Union peacekeepers, first AMISOM, now ATMIS for security.
And the threat from Al-Shabaab is still very real.
Very real and persistent. The extremist group still controls significant rural territory, carries out devastating attacks in Mogadishu and elsewhere, and actively works to undermine the government and any sense of stability.
Plus, you've got climate change hitting hard, too.
Massively. Recurrent, devastating droughts interspersed with catastrophic floods. This exacerbates everything, destroys livelihoods, forces displacement, increases competition over scarce resources like water and grazing land, which can fuel local conflicts and provide recruits for groups like Al-Shabaab. It's a vicious cycle layered on top of the political fragility.
Okay, so amidst all this fragility and fragmentation inside the country, there's this other huge part of the Somali nation, the diaspora, the Kurbujugta. Sources suggest they're not just people who left, they're fundamental to keeping the whole thing going.
They absolutely are. You can't understand modern Somalia without understanding the diaspora. The exodus, especially after 1991, was enormous. The UN figures suggest around 2 million Somalis live outside the country now.
2 million? Out of a total population of maybe 16, 17 million. That's huge.
It's well over 10%, and they're spread out. Huge refugee populations remain in neighboring Kenya, Dadaab, and Ethiopia, but also large established communities in the West, the US especially, Minneapolis, St. Paul, London in the UK, Sweden, Canada, Norway, and elsewhere. It's a truly global nation now.
And the most direct impact they have is economic, isn't it? The remittances? This is where the shadow state idea comes in.
Exactly. Remittances are the economic lifeline. The estimates vary wildly because so much goes through informal channels, the Hawala system. But we're consistently talking huge numbers, somewhere between 1.3 billion and maybe even 2 billion US dollars sent back every single year.
$2 billion. How does that compare to, like, foreign aid?
It completely dwarfs official international development aid. It probably dwarfs the entire revenue of the official federal government. This is money going directly from diaspora individuals to their families back home.
What did that money do?
It pays for everything. Basic survival, food, water, housing, healthcare bills, school fees for kids, starting small businesses. It's estimated that maybe 40% of all households in Somalia rely on these remittances to some extent. It's a massive, decentralized, private social safety net that effectively bypasses the broken state and keeps millions afloat. It is a kind of shadow state, funding the nation's survival privately.
Wow. But it's not just about money, is it? The diaspora also plays a role in keeping the culture alive.
Hugely important role. Think about those communities in Minneapolis, London, Toronto. They set up cultural centers. They use Somali media, satellite television, websites, social media to stay connected, to debate politics back home, to transmit cultural values.
So they're not just preserving the culture, they're also kind of evolving it, creating new identities.
Absolutely. You see the emergence of these dynamic hybrid identities. Kids growing up, Somali American, Somali British, Somali Finnish, they navigate multiple cultures. It ensures Somali culture isn't some static thing preserved in amber. It's living, changing, adapting to new, global realities. It's being redefined in Helsinki as much as in Hargeisa.
And are people from the diaspora going back, getting involved in rebuilding?
Yes, increasingly. Many who got educated abroad, gained skills and capital, are returning, either permanently or temporarily. They're involved in business and NGOs and very significantly in politics. A large number of politicians and senior civil servants in Mogadishu, Hargeisa, and Grow are diaspora returnees. They bring different perspectives, connections, sometimes controversies, but they are a major force shaping the country's future direction.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, what's the main takeaway? If you had to boil down this incredible story of the Somali people,
I think it comes back to that idea of resilience, but resilience rooted in specific things. The power isn't in the state structures, clearly, it's in the cultural identity.
right? That shared Cushitic origin myth, the almost universal language, especially after 72, the shared Islamic faith, and maybe most practically, that incredibly complex, adaptable kinship system.
Exactly. Those things provided the continuity, the social glue. When the political container shattered, it's a story of cultural endurance almost in spite of political history.
And maybe the key insight is how those pre-state structures, the clan system and poetry, weren't just relics. They were functional.
They were highly functional systems. The clan system, the Hare and Mag, provided a rational, localized way to manage justice, security, and resources when there was no central authority. And poetry acted as this decentralized network for governance, communication, history, keeping people give allegiance to what provides them security and justice. You see, and for decades, for many Somalis, that hasn't been the official state. It's been the clan network sustained by culture and now significantly by diaspora money.
Which leaves us with a really interesting final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on. If the Somali nation persists through culture, kinship, and global connections, what does that mean for its future? The political direction is being shaped not just in Mogadishu or Hargeisa,
but just as much in Minneapolis, London, Stockholm, Dubai, through remittances, through returnees, through online debates.
So the provocative question is, what does it truly mean for a nation's identity, its very survival, to be so fundamentally transnational, to rely so heavily on its global diaspora, not just for money, but for its future political